2, 1.
All right. Hello and welcome to our presentation about remote Scrum Mastery and facilitation. I call it "How the heck do I do this?" because that was the question that I had when I first got started doing this. So we're gonna just take a trip through this. I want to say that this particular presentation is almost exclusively about the remote nature of this. This is not a presentation on how to be a Scrum Master so much as it is how to be a Scrum Master when you're somewhere else. So that's what this thing is going to be about. And if you're not a Scrum Master, or if you're wanting to use it in other ways, I think this is really about general facilitation from a remote nature. Like, how do I do that activity? How do I play that role and be somewhere else? And so this is what this is about. Now, as we're going through this, we're going to have some sections and stuff like that. We'll do questions at the end. If you can start submitting them even now, that'd be awesome. So you can start submitting the questions into the system right now. So you can start submitting them, and then we'll start addressing them at the very end. And I'll throw out a couple more calls out for questions as we go through this. So let me introduce myself. My name is Ty Crockett. I am a trainer, I think, in as far as my role, my title is concerned in my organization. But I end up doing consulting, business development, help with recruiting and interviews, you name it. If it's something where I can be a part of the organization, that's what I do. I try to be a strong part of our community. I'm an artist, but I don't get to draw as much as I used to. I used to do a comic book in college to eat lunch. But I bring as much of that as I can to my classes that I deliver and the consulting that I do. I'm a gamer, and I try to bring that into what I do normally also. And I mean gamer of every type: board game, computers, console, you name it, I think I game it. I don't know anything about sports, which I think makes me weird in Texas. And so I don't go outside very much, so this whole COVID lockdown thing hasn't been as impactful to me maybe as has been to other people. And that's kind of my whole nerd profile going on there. I work for this amazing company called Improving, which is maybe how you got here today. It is a company that focuses in on technology, but has expansive skills in various areas. We are now at 14 offices. I used to say it's a small company, little boutique shop, but we keep growing. And so it is now 14 offices across North America, including in Canada and Mexico. So this has become a pretty cool ride, a pretty cool venture. Speaking of the ride, I think when we start this particular discussion, we have to start with our values as a foundation. We have to start by letting these things lead us. In a world of complexity, which this is where Scrum does its job, in a world of high complexity, the answer is not no, it can't be, or else it's not complex. But our values give us a true north. They lead us in a specific direction. So here's the truth. We say that these things are super important to us. They're the most important things, but these values are Scrum's values, and they are not the most important ones to me. I would say that the most important values to me are my own. Now, here's the really cool thing. My values and Scrum's values resonate. And so now we can go on this ride together. And so since that's true, I can hold these values in high regard. And before I make decisions, or maybe it's part of my decision process for how I'm going to address remote Scrum Mastery or just being a Scrum Master, these values kind of lead me in that direction. So whatever I'm going to do, you want to check it against the values. And if there's something where they're just ingrained and they're inherent with you, you don't have to check. It just, if it goes against them, it kind of offends your sensibility. So Keep that in mind. We'll talk about these as we go through, but keep that in mind is that we start with the values. And while Scrum has values, we probably have seen values somewhere else, like in an Agile manifesto or something like that. And then those values are backed up by some principles. And I think for what we're talking about, this particular subject, one, I want to put forefront. And it is this concept that the most efficient and effective way of conveying information is face-to-face. Now, if that's the case, we want to be closer to face-to-face. So this is a visual that I made based on the work of Alistair Coburn, who's one of the guys that made that whole manifesto thing. So you can see things that are on the right get us closer and closer to face-to-face. Things that are on the left get us a little bit farther away from it. And the things that are on the left reduce our bandwidth of conversation, or the bandwidth of interaction, the quality of that, the depth of it. And so we're constantly trying in this environment to get farther over to the right. And I use that face-to-face thing. One time an architect said to me, I get you on the face-to-face thing, but I would add one more piece to it, is being face-to-face at a whiteboard. That's better. So do that. And so I've added that visual in here. I sent it to Alistair, and he told me I was missing something on the other side of it too. He liked that, but he said I was missing something on the other side of it. And he goes, don't forget, because I used to say, man, sending in a document, creating a document, an electronic document, storing it on SharePoint or Dropbox or whatever you have, Google Drive, it's the worst. Like, that's the farthest away that we could be. And he's like, don't forget, we still print stuff or write it down and we stick it in a drawer, and it's lonely and sitting there and just waiting for somebody to come and visit it. And so maybe that's the worst. That's the least high in its bandwidth for communication. So this is just something that also to keep in mind. Maybe put something like this up in at the beginning of a meeting, or go over it every so often with your groups. So we divided this into 4 areas: people, logistics, technology, and events. And we'll go and kind of touch on what this means for us in every space. I of course put the humanity of it first, because as Scrum Masters, we're primarily working with people, and so let's keep that forefront, the human dynamics that are involved in here. And then there's a lot of stuff that we do that involves logistics of helping things to work. Not that we have to go and execute on those, but that we're responsible for the environment in which our people work. So we're responsible for creating an environment for success. And then because we're talking about doing it remotely, and because we're in the age that we live in, technology is a part of that. And it doesn't matter if you're a Scrum Master for a technology-based organization or a team that builds apps or whatever the case may be. Technology is just a part of the workforce today. There's very few companies that can say they're not technology-based in the way that they get stuff done. And then finally, events. And I'm talking about Scrum events, but if you're not a Scrum Master, again, it could just be the events that you go into, a project meeting or a team meeting for that matter. How do we deal with the events themselves? So we'll break that down event by event. All right, so people. Here's what I noticed. When we started to really deal with Scrum, we start noticing one of the big complaints and then the appreciation points is, man, this is a lot of, at first it's called a lot of meetings. When you start doing Scrum, it's a lot of meetings. And the point is, actually, if we start to look at it differently, it's like, hey, if we're talking about complex things, do we want to check in more often? If we're talking about high-risk things, do we want to check in more often? The answer is yes, if we state it in that way. And Scrum provides those opportunities. As a matter of fact, we know in a fast-paced, rapidly changing development environment, whatever it is you're developing, whatever it is you're building, maybe once per day is not even good enough. Like, man, you let this go for an entire 24 hours? Are you nuts? Like, that's not good enough sometimes. So even in going to Scrum, we noticed that frequent check-ins was just a part of reducing risk and better understanding what we're tackling, especially if we're a collaborative group trying to make something happen. So here's what I'm thinking, man, when we start going to this virtual world, we're actually removing quality of communication. So that puts more risk in place. It makes it a more complex situation. So the weird part is those check-ins may need to be more frequent because we don't have the opportunity to turn around and just chat with your buddy who's sitting next to you. You don't have the opportunity to like look over your monitor and be like, hey, dude, we don't have that thing. So how do we address that? And some people leave video running the whole time or whatever the case may be. I don't know. That piece is up to your team. And I'm saying the team, not the Scrum Master, but the team itself. And the Scrum Master is part of the team, but the Scrum Master is not the decider on this. So it becomes up to your team. And so you're going to get it wrong, no problem. That's just the way it works because we don't see the future. So therefore, retrospective as soon as you can, and maybe do it multiple times on just this subject alone. So on just how are we doing with this? How does this work? And you notice I will be very specific in my wording. I'm just saying retrospective, like a general retrospective, an agile retrospective I did, but I'm not saying a Scrum sprint retrospective. You don't have the exact same goals here. So, and it doesn't have to be during that time period, just a retrospective. There's a fantastic book called Agile Retrospectives. Check that one out. All right. And here's our focus, here's our values thing. So we value focus, so therefore, don't be that Scrum Master. You know the one I'm talking about, the one who's like, hey guys, do you need something? Hey, what are you doing right now? Hey. All of a sudden, that space where the developers are finally getting, because nobody's around, they're finally getting an opportunity like to focus in and get something done, and you keep interrupting it. Like, I know you want to be helpful, I know you want to be the awesome Scrum Master, but take a note from what the right amount is. Get that from your team, and they'll help you out with that. But we value focus, so don't be that Scrum Master. And then here's a emotional intelligence one, is like check the nonverbal feedback. You can see when things aren't resonating. Once again, why video may be a pretty important thing, but also you can hear it in people's voices. You can see it if you have video, you can see it in body language, in the person who was smiling and then immediately went to a straight stone face. Like, see how this stuff is hitting and resonating with your people. All right, because people are complex. And while we think we have them all figured out, like we've been working on this for a long time, and I'm saying like thousands of years, and we're still not the best at it. So, so take some things in this space. When I look at my own bookshelves, they're not full of Scrum books. They're not full of Kanban books. They're not full of Lean books. They're books full of things about people, leadership, human dynamics, what motivates people. Like, this is what fills my shelves, and this is where we're going to be focused when we're talking about stuff with people. I put up some things that have been resonant with me. Learning styles. A professor at SMU who works with us, his name is Ken Howard, he introduced me to this thing called VARK, visual, auditory, read, write, and kinesthetic learners. And so whenever I create events, I'm trying to touch all of these different learning styles. As much as we like to call it something else, when we're in most of the events, we're taking in new information and then making a decision on what we're going to do with it. But I think the big part of the events is usually taking in and processing the new information. So a lot of the stuff that we do is learning. And then we might game out some different scenarios on how we can get something accomplished, and it doesn't really matter until we actually start to try to do it. So we try it, and it's always an experiment. Take into consideration that you're serving different people, introverts and extroverts. And the unfortunate part about our early transition to agile workspaces and agile environments, friendly environments, was, man, they were all about the extroverts. Let's stick everybody at a table, make it really, really close, and oh my goodness, no other space whatsoever. You lost your desk. If you live up north, you probably didn't have a place to hang your coat. Like, what the heck are you thinking? Like, this was something that we created, but like, when you're thinking about this, in your workspace, when you go back to the physical space, introverts and extroverts, when you're thinking about this in your workspace where you have this virtual environment, think about that too. Like, how do we create an environment that's good for those people? And introverts and extroverts is not about good and bad. It isn't that you're more of a team player when you're an extrovert or any of that stuff. It's about how do you get your energy and comfort space, like what does that look like for you? All right. I also create space for both contemplative people and collaborative people, and create space for those type of activities to both happen. It isn't, let me throw something in front of you and we just instantly have an answer. Maybe there's some time for silent writing. Maybe there's time for everybody to start throwing out ideas and putting stuff in place. Use some tools that help with this. I put privacy and confidentiality into different places. Privacy, just the concept of like taking screenshots, because it's really cool. My team's doing all this stuff. I took a screenshot of them. Did you ask permission? Like, how's that going? Privacy starts to look a lot different. We're not just talking about people at the office, but we're talking about coming into somebody's home in this environment, and you're like, okay, I'm looking at the stuff in the background and asking you questions about that. Like, is that a sock on that chair? Like that kind of stuff. Like, so start thinking about those pieces. And then the confidentiality, like the fact that we had these discussions, the fact that they were online and sometimes even recorded. Okay, so what are you doing with that information? I want to know that the things that were done here were kind of in some way held sacred, that you respected the confidentiality of this conversation. And the crazy part for Scrum Masters is you have multiple levels of that. You have your confidentiality and agreements that you have with the organization that employs you, with the goals of whatever the team is itself, and with the individual who you might have a conversation with. So think of those on 3 different levels and explain it to the different groups who you're working with. And I would have it up front before something happens that might send you into a conflict space. Start talking about what that looks like. And don't forget to leverage your superpowers. I always say the Scrum Masters have too. I believe in it more and more as the years pass, because this is the secret to my success as I've been a Scrum Master. And people think it's pretty cheesy. No, it has to be something else, but this is what I got. And if it's something else, I don't know what it is. Take it to the team. I remember, I often think that I'm really smart about something, and what I find out over and over and over again is that my team of systems thinkers that I work with are smarter than me as an individual. That's just it. Now, here's what's really cool. If you're a really brilliant, like you're the smartest Scrum Master in the world, if you add yourself to that team of systems thinkers, then now you're an even better team. So take the problems to the team. That's what they do, solve problems, right? This is a creative group that solves problems. That's what they do for a living. They can solve their own. They can manage their day. It's crazy to think of that, but they can. And so, and then here's the deal. Sometimes I get given back the problem. The team will look at me like, oh, we have never done anything like this before. Here, let me hand that right back to you. And I'm like, talk to the hand. And I'm going to ask you to do the best you can, because that's it. As a matter of fact, every day on a development team, when you're building a new product, every day of that, or a new feature, it's never been done before. So that's just what life is on a development team. Everything that we ever do has never been done before. Not with these vendors, in this scenario, with this legacy code that we're dealing with, and this group of crazy personalities that we just smashed together. It's never been done before. So that's just what it is to be on a team anyway. So got some more? There are questions in the chat. We'll hit them as soon as we go through this. Moving into logistics now. All right, so when we're talking about people conversing in this remote setting and interacting in a remote setting, group sizes really matter. As a matter of fact, having, more than 4, I think, starts to get into the weird space. 12 people trying to talk simultaneously is just ridiculous. 2 people can't, because most of the technology doesn't allow for that to happen well. So when we deal with this, small groups are better. Luckily, Scrum team size kind of limits that anyway, or I should say suggested Scrum team size kind of limits that anyway. But maybe start to feel what breakouts mean when you want to start to collaborate. That way the people voices can be heard during that time period. Now, some of the tools that you use may not allow for breakout rooms. You got to get real creative in that space. I use Zoom most often because it has a pretty good breakout room functionality. And even then, we have this thing like not 5, but 4 or less in the breakout rooms. We just try to figure out a way to put the numbers together so that's the size. Learn this one from video games, because all these multiplayer video games, they usually limit the group size to like 3 to 4. You get some that make them like really big. I'm looking at you, World of Warcraft. And so like they get to like really, really big sizes. But man, the communication for that is pretty difficult. And we're not trying to increase complexity, we're trying to reduce it. The sound and space is different. In this room, I can walk farther back and start to diminish my impact on the people who are over there. But I can't do that in a virtual setting. I have just as much precedence in me speaking as my colleague who's in Europe. So you got to think about that when you're talking over each other, because you don't actually get to talk over the other person. You just clash words that people are saying, and it sounds like nothing, or just a ton of noise. Cacophony is the word I think of. All right, and so those simultaneous conversations. Ugh. All right, here's something that I put out early. If things go wrong, or better yet, set what happens when things go wrong. So you come into the event or meeting or whatever you have, like state first, even before introductions, if things go bad, here's our muster point. Is it email? Am I going to text everyone? Is it going to be on a SharePoint site or some place where I can post it publicly? You'll know how to get back in, what to do, where to get communication and direction from. First, start with where your muster point is in the case that something goes wrong, and then go do all the other cool stuff for the meeting, because it will go wrong. The first public class that I taught after we all came home from for COVID, I think my computer crashed like 3 times in one morning. And so this particular one came from that space. All right. So things to remember about facilitation: summarize the tools that you're going to use, talk about them up front. I didn't have to do that for this one because you guys got it earlier. So if I were talking about this though, I'd say, okay, so our communication tool will be Microsoft Teams. If you have anything to make somebody aware of, to say, if there's a question, everything goes through Teams. Even though other tools might have a way of us talking, like let's keep it here so we can always keep our eye on what that looks like. All right, our collaboration tool is going to be, I use Mural, mural.co, as a constant thing for classes. So we're going to do all of our work is going to fit in that space. That's what we're going to do collaboration at. So, and here's what the tools do, here's how they work. And so you kind of put that stuff up front. Okay, here's what we did last time, summarize a previous event. Here's what we did last time, and here's how that carries over. And don't forget to talk about the big picture. Before all this stuff happened, Scrum teams had this problem that became enough that people started to have an issue with it, of staying in the weeds so much, being so tactical that they never understood the big picture or why we were doing something. So just generally, don't forget the big picture. So here's what we did last time. Here's how that fits in the big picture. Here's where we're planning on heading today. Here's how that stuff matters. Discuss things about late participants a bit early, because every single time you have one, it isn't just that they have to kind of catch up. If you talked about tools and you're introduced all these different concepts or anything that you need, it has to be done all over again. And if you're the person who's doing it, that means you stop helping the group and start with that one individual. And then if somebody else then comes in late, start back over again. That's pretty expensive. So think about that. And then breaks are very different. I think we used to do like, let's go for an hour and a half, let's go for 2 hours before we take a break in a meeting. That's different. I don't think that we will do that anymore. For me, in these things, in classes maybe, and in work groups, at least every hour. Maybe a short time period, but at least every hour. And but this is a thing where you discuss it with your team. What's the right number? People will tell you. And here's something that I found personally jarring and I struggled with a little bit was, as a facilitator, I know I have responsibility for the space that the facilitation exists in, for dealing with my people, for helping them, for making sure that it is a safe space, that it's well suited to whatever we're talking about or dealing with. But when you send people off to a breakout room or into a space that you're not there, it's really hard to say that you are owning that activity. So you can't be everywhere. You need to have that discussion with your people that you're facilitating the event for or being a part of when you do this. So think about that. Think about how you might address it, but also bring this issue to your team. You'll see that coming up over and over again. Bring it to the team. Bring it to the team. The technology. Do you assume video? Is that going to be a thing that you guys all do? Sometimes people don't have it. Sometimes their tech is too old. Their internet connection is not good enough, and that wasn't originally part of the job description. What do we do? A couple of monitors, in my opinion, made life a little bit easier. I got a couple, 4. If I count my phone, I got 5. And so it just made I kept a lot of things going on. This is my setup on my desk that I'm using right now. On the far left, I have all of my stuff that's rolling information, calendar, email, any of my messaging tools all sit over there. On the far right, on my laptop, which I'm looking at you guys on, is where I have video running, and I usually have that full screen running for whatever group I'm working with. And then in the middle is where I'm doing work, or whatever my current work tool is. And then sometimes I like to draw things, so I have my handy dandy Apple Pencil, and I'll draw things on my iPad, which works as my surface to draw things. So this is it. I think there's something I got from, it was a financial book and advisor I read a long time ago, and it was, if you don't enjoy using your system, you will find reasons not to. And I believe that works for your physical environment. Make it something you enjoy being a part of. You see people bring little things and put on their desk and stuff at work. Like, make your home space something where you enjoy it, especially if you're going to be trying to pull an 8-hour day sitting at a new desk. Like, ugh. Like, make it something where you enjoy being there. So create that. Let's see. And also, like, the mobile and tablet becomes viable, not just because of the things I just described, but also when I don't have the ability to look at things through my screen, I can, or to project video via my computer. Maybe I can do it with my phone. Maybe I can do it with a tablet. So there's other options. And believe me, all those vendors who produce these tools definitely have a mobile option for you because they want you using their stuff. And you don't always have to use all of your tech. The more tools we put in place, the more complex and confusing we make our environment. I think 2 tools is usually where I want to stop at. And you heard me say them earlier. Communication and collaboration. I use those 2 things. As soon as we start adding a 3rd tool, a 4th tool into the mix, people are like, okay, so wait, where are we doing that in? What are we doing in? Oh, you're there. And it just over and over again, it's happening. And so don't make that painful, and make the access, the installation, all that stuff easier. If it's the first time for some people, set up time periods for them to come in, check their tech, play around with it, even if it's just 15 minutes early. That's risky, but it's less risky than you just showed up to the beginning of the meeting and the tech's not working. Even for this event that we did here, and this is something we do every week, we have a time period where we check just to verify that everything's working right. And we discuss this, so this is the way it works. All right, there's going to be ad hoc needs, things that come along every so often. They just spur of the moment stuff. Think about that. How are you going to deal with it? Oftentimes we'll have like a second just in case, like maybe I fall off because of my bad tech or bad connections. There's a second, somebody who's just ready to take over. They're familiar with what we're trying to do, what the goals are. That's a cool thing in the space, and it's a great skill for people to develop anyway. So think about those pieces. You might have some team members who have bad technology or bad connections. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to deal with it? Maybe it's something your organization needs to address. And finally, this is one that has probably been solved for almost everybody. What features and products are you going to use to help you make this stuff happen? I go all the way down to, like, even think about licensing models, but also think about that privacy and confidentiality thing. Hey, this one we use, it's free, but it also allows them to use everything that you did and said for their own marketing purposes. And all of a sudden you start seeing some client confidential stuff on the internet. And then your CFO's kind of upset, and the organization has to write that note to all their customers, and then it's on the news, and like all of a sudden the stock market's altering because of something you did. All right, so now finally we're going to get into Scrum, and then we're going to take some questions around this. So the events themselves, you can see I have my little picture here of like what Scrum looks like. This is what it looks like inside my head. And we'll get to, like, okay, so pre-work, if there's anything your teams need to deal with before they come into the event, and this is not about Scrum, this is more so about just events. If there's anything they need to have ready, they need to know, they need to deal with, like, just have that discussion. Not only telling them, hey, you're going to need this, but asking, does anybody know of anything else we might need to be able to be successful for this particular event? And so have that stuff ready. Then afterwards, do you send out stuff to them? How do you gather it? How does it go? Does somebody send it? Do you have a place where it stays? Which things are accessible to people who are outside of the team? Which things are accessible only to the team? Do you have tools that will allow those different levels of rights? Like what do you do after the event? And let's see, so I found that saying things slowly, step by step, really helps. With one of the tools that we use, I'll talk about, there's an outline that lets you jump from space to space inside the collaboration space. And so in talking about this, like, if you guys will notice, in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and when I say screen, I mean the browser window that you're in, there's an outline. If you don't see an outline, in the far upper right-hand corner, there is a bulleted list, 3 bullets and 3 lines, and that will make the outline come up. If you click it, it shows up, it's pink. If you click it again, it goes away, and the outline goes away with it. So make sure you can find that. There's an outline list 1 to X. It sits on the right-hand side. Clicking this will get you to that space. Clicking this will get you to that space. So you're talking just really simple with those things. And in our world of technology, there's a difference between click, double click, right click, click and hold, click, hold, drag. Oh my goodness. So get that kind of stuff down. I started my career working at Microsoft, and the first thing they did was take away all of our mice for an entire week, and we had to do technical support. And I started learning those words really, really fast. So give yourself some space. You can probably just look it up as to what the difference is in all these different ways of talking about things. But if you're going to facilitate these events, a lot of this falls on you to make sure it happens. And I'm saying this very specifically. It falls on you to make sure it happens. That doesn't mean you have to do it. If there's somebody who's better at it, let them do their thing. But it needs to happen. So you're talking to people about this. And then repeating it. Like, I know we just talked about going up to the outline, but in case you forgot, here's how that works. And so you can talk about that. And even like there's warnings, like so many products that I use, there'll be something that says like back to dashboard. It's inside the actual window or the tool, which is actually, it's next to the back button for something else, or next to the closeout button for the product itself. And I'm like, why would they put that there? I want my UX team to go help them out. But it's something that you might warn people about as you're talking about these things. And don't make it where everybody has to rely on you to move to the next space. You have that powerful team, leverage them. And the question might be, what's the best way for us to go address this? So don't make yourself the bottleneck for things. Let the system thinkers do what they do. All right, so that's the basics. So all that stuff before Scrum. Now let's talk about what deltas maybe Scrum would bring to this. And you can see I have this visual is, it shows some things as having bigger dots than others. And I think the things that have the bigger dots are going to be the things that are maybe a bit more changed or have a bit more work in the virtual space. Sprint planning just doesn't seem that different to me, besides the fact that maybe you used a wall, but so many people were going, even when they have a physical space to build their stuff in, so many people were going to virtual products anyway. And the problem used to be with those virtual products is you couldn't actually see the whole body of work, which was kind of messed up. But today, with 4K monitors and with different resolutions, different tools, you might be able to see the body of work in front of you, and that's kind of cool. There's always this beautiful thing about a wall or a whiteboard where I can step about 6 feet away and see so much stuff. And we were looking for things that have that same feel to it. And so maybe you transition your wall of work to something like this. Now here's the deal. Maybe your organization doesn't have one of those cool tools to do collaboration with. Don't let that stop you. PowerPoint, you can do this. Like I could build this thing in PowerPoint in minutes. And so just go use those kind of tools, because whatever it is, and depending on if you have one of those online versions, you can simultaneously edit. That's really the thing, is we're trying to get that same feel of a few people at a whiteboard. The cool part is about online, it's not just the 3 people who are standing extra close to each other if they're all at a whiteboard at the same time, but it's the 10 people who can simultaneously touch something that now is actually become an advantage in this space. So that's what it looked like. But as far as the rest of Scrum, this is on the left-hand side, you see the stuff that Scrum says you should do. That's pretty much the same thing. I don't think that changes. Now, the daily Scrum, I think this one has a little bit more, but the weird part is, as far as the Scrum Master is concerned, not really that much. For you guys who have been facilitating a daily Scrum, that's not your job. Like, we have a development team, it's theirs, and the Scrum Master doesn't have much to do here besides to make sure it happens and to teach the people how. If you find yourself teaching the development team how to do this every day, there is a problem. It is not with the development team. It is definitely something about the Scrum Master. So if anything, maybe I would ask them, what are you optimizing for? Because here's something I see as a really common thing that teams do. Maybe they have that little ball that they pass around, who has the speaking stick or whatever, which sounds like they're optimizing for individuals filling themselves up with work, and then they come back and say what they did the next day. Whereas maybe you optimize for the body of work itself, and how do we get the most value out of it? Then maybe what you talk about is the work itself instead of my turn to talk. So that's a decision your teams need to make, but ask, what are you optimizing for? If you're optimizing for something, what is the center subject of the event? And so that's something for the development team to figure out. All right, the sprint review. I think this one has, maybe it's in the most change in the space. And I say that because if you're used to physically getting together and having these discussions, then you might have to leverage a lot of tools to replicate the stuff that you would do in person. But a lot of those tools actually give us more of the stuff that we should have been getting out of sprint reviews anyway. Data analytics and information that helps you to make decisions are all in the space. Just remember, this is not a demo. I know that we've been calling it that for a long time, but that was never what it was called. Will you demonstrate a product? Sure. Will you demonstrate an increment of work? Yep. But if that was one of the 10 to 15 things that you need to do, like, that's kind of a small part of it. The rest of it is about the business meeting, the critical product review, the working session that we're trying to get accomplished in this time period. How much money do we make? How much do we plan on? How much does it look like we're going to make based on the data that sits in front of us? How much time have we spent? What are we trending towards? How do customers feel about it? How do we feel about our job? What'll be really horrible is that we switch this way of working, we start losing people like crazy. Like, what's happening to give us information about how do we make better decisions? At the end of the day, the question is, over and over again, should we change the product backlog? And so can you do that in this event? Do you have the right information? Your stakeholders are there. And I mean all the stakeholders, the dev manager, all the way the CFO, a customer, sales, like all these people are involved to make the decision on what should we do with what the product could be and how is it happening for us. And so good stuff can come out of this. Most of the stuff that's on that list is right out of the Scrum Guide, except for the first two, the vision and the sprint goal. But I'm hoping they'll see it in the next version. All right. So this one I think has a bunch of different things that you need to start making easier when they're virtual. And then finally, the retrospective. While I believe that the sprint review might have seen the most change, I believe the retrospective is the one that has the most risk of abuse. And it's because of the first thing, safety first. We forget about the safety of our people when we start to get into our tools. Yeah, we put it into Jira, and we have everything in a Confluence board. And the crazy thing is, a Confluence board is accessible to everybody inside the organization, and somebody put something that only they wanted to expose to their Scrum team. Confidentiality, privacy, both violated, right? And so this is where the second thing comes in, Vegas rules. Like, hey, what happens in the retrospective stays in the retrospective. Now, are there things that the team might want to deliver out to the organization? Absolutely, cool. Why don't we discuss what those are and how they might want to deliver that information to them? And so therefore the teams saying how they want these things to go out, that's really cool. And it's not yours to heavily influence them to make that happen. Sometimes we use our superpowers for evil. All right. And so another thing is that there's an opportunity here. Anybody can facilitate a sprint retrospective. It doesn't, the Scrum Master is not their like exclusive thing. And so put that stuff in place, see what happens, see what different subjects come up, because this is a pretty big change to the way that you're working if you weren't used to working this way. And then you have maybe some different tools that are in this space. I told you I liked Mural, but man, there's so many. There's Miro, there's idea boards. I'm going to throw out PowerPoint, slides, or whatever you have as your presentation tool. All those things have some type of multi-user interface when you're remote, and you can do that in those tools also. There's just so many things that are in that space. I've even seen people use Trello as because it's columns, you can move things. This is what went well, this didn't, and boom, you can start using those different tools. There's just so many things that people can use in a space. So don't limit yourself, and go ask a question and let the teams figure out what's best for them. So at the end of the day, you got all these tools that are a part of your toolbox that you can bring to bear. And this is just doing the same job somewhere else. It needs to resonate with your values, and that leads us to what the right thing to do is at the right time. Really big job, but you got a lot of help. You got these amazing teams that help you out here. So my name is Ty Crockett. I thank you guys for coming and talking to me. If you haven't put any questions into the chat, this is another good time to go and put those in. I also want to throw out another presentation that I believe if you came to this, then maybe you probably want to see the next one, which I believe this is the other half of this presentation, which is what remote product ownership looks like. So this is Don McGreal. He wrote the book on Scrum Product Owner. This is his presentation called Steering the Ship from Afar. It's also on our site, which is improving.com/virtual-events is where you'll find all of our different versions of this. You can also check out our YouTube page and find some of these videos. And so improving. All right, I think if we can, let's see how many questions we can get in this time period.
Yeah, we got some questions. All right, first one says, by now, many of us have a solid grip on storming, norming, and even performing remotely due to how long we've been working remote. What do you suggest for the morning stage or sunsetting of a project? I often see people jump ship when there is about 1.5 sprints left. It isn't out of spite, but because they or their manager prioritize a different project higher. This adds stress to the PO and Scrum Master and the remaining dev team members who have to manage the completion of the work. Attrition is natural, but do you have suggestions for a Scrum Master to close out a project with the majority of the team still intact?
Yeah, I want to give two parts to this, and I'm definitely giving them from my own perspective here. Two parts of this. One is the Scrum Master has, I think, the bigger problem may be instead of sending the work to the team, we're sending the team to the work, or actually the individuals in this scenario, the individuals to work. So this is the old problem that we originally tried to solve with a Scrum team, which is instead of letting a project-based team learn each other, fall down a few times, get back up, start running, and become a highly functional, cohesive group, when we do all that, when we spend all that time, effort, and energy, when we get that work in place, they get to become a well-oiled machine. They're moving, 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 and the project's over, we blow them up. And we start over again with that cost. So this might be a space for the Scrum Master. I'm not gonna say it's might. It is a space for the Scrum Master to advise the organization on their investment in this particular activity, and especially Scrum. Like, talk about what that looks like. Here's what the cost of it is for us. And it could be an emotional toll, financial, time, however, and I would actually probably put all three in that place and talk about that piece. So that's one part of it, is maybe switch the way that we're doing this. Now, some organizations got it, heard it, we're not doing that. Or the Scrum thing is such a small aspect of the big thing that people are doing, but they just say, no, we're not going to do that. And so the moment that that's like not on the table, and now we just have to work inside the constraints that we have, now we're looking at, I know that there was a projection, because Scrum doesn't promise you when these things are going to be done. I know there was a projection for this, even based on the trending data of how much we were consuming over time. It looked like we were going to hit that date, but now we've changed the variables of what our team looks like. And this is not new for Scrum. This was traditional projects also. When I started getting towards the end of a traditional project, I already got assigned my new one because they were lined up back to back. And you know what? What was really important? The new thing. And so I started paying less attention to my current thing and started working towards my new thing. So this is not new for anybody, but I think it's to reposition what the trend looks like. So the data that we had from the first 6 months, it's not as relevant anymore because we've lost the people. And the data that we had last sprint is more realistic to look at. The data we had the last sprint is probably going to be the indicator of how we're going to keep moving forward, because now you're shifting and it's actually a different team. So I would actually use that data to start making my trends and guesses off of. But again, under all these circumstances, you promise nothing, because there still could be something. We ran into a really weird spot, and doing the work in that really weird spot caused us to come to a complete halt, and we got nothing to done in the sprint. And I want to throw one more thing out here. It matters on how product management worked also. So if your product backlog did that horrible thing of delaying risk till the end, like, oh man, that looks hard, I'm not going to deal with that, we're going to put that at the end. Well, now you're talking about a more likely chance of something to blow up and fall apart on us. So that will be the thing that I would say in that space is either change the way we approach products, and I'm not saying you get to change it, but start to have that discussion around what it looks like to do that, and inform your organization. That's the responsibility of a Scrum Master, to inform the organization about their investment, or advise the people who are making those projections to use realistic current data to make projections.
All right. Next question says, what remote celebrations and activities do you recommend for remote teams? What about if teams are remote across the Atlantic or have a different time of day or cultural differences prevent some type of typical celebrations like virtual happy hours and coffee hours? I
Yeah.
don't want to skip them because the bonding of the team members truly help the performance of the dev team, but do you have any recommendations?
Yeah. So this one, I got to say, my first thing is take it to the team to see what they would most want to do. So I got to say that. Here's some things that I've experienced in my own past. So I should say most of my teams, there's always somebody who's like, hey, we could have that virtual happy hour, and they're talking about all the different things, like we have this mixology thing and all that, right? But take that stuff away. The point was for us to get together and share drinking something. It doesn't have to be an alcoholic beverage, like tea, coffee, just water. It's about us spending our time together. And so I think if the team enjoys that behavior, enjoys that spending time together, then the question really is about in what ways can we spend our time together and not have the pressure of our job and still get to know each other, get to learn each other a bit more, just become a better, more cohesive team, not just a bunch of people working on the same product or working on the same thing or project. And there's a lot of stuff that's there, like there's online games that are free. There's if you're using the collaboration tools that we talked about earlier, there's things that you can do in there, like, okay, we're going to get together and draw something about how we felt about this or whatever. The thing that gets people to talk to each other, to look to each other, to have a chuckle, that stuff is what really we're talking about. Even when we were face to face, people want to go out to dinner and you have like 12 people. Like, they're not going to talk to each other. They're going to talk to the person who's across the table from them, maybe one or two over. We finally started finding really fun ways of doing it. We go to a place where you do paintings. We are face to face. We go to a place where you do paintings, and people are moving around and talking to each other. We go to a bowling alley because you're forced to move around and communicate with each other. So you're wanting to do things and use your same collaboration tools, but just make it not about the work, it's about the humans. And ask those questions, but stay within comfort zones. And you can ask people where the comfort zones lie. If you have a really great tool, it'll let people anonymously say where their comfort zone lies. And I think that's really a thing towards a safety spot of establishing comfort zones. Cool.
All right. Next question says, how do I handle the overly talkative team members who turn every conversation into technical discussion? Their knowledge is valuable, but that makes the rest of the team members go quiet.
Yeah. Two things for this. One is have a general discussion about how you guys address conversations, because it's not about that human. It's about you guys have. This goes into the thing that we've been doing for a while called working agreements. This goes into like a working agreement of here's how we interact inside this virtual space. Another thing might be is to address that problem directly, especially if more than one person has noticed this issue. This is the responsibility of being a part of a team, is to bring this up, and it doesn't have to be a mean or violent or angry confrontation, but it is dealing with, a conflict. And so you can deal with those conflicts in gentle and loving ways. And so it is up to the entire Scrum team to actually bring these subjects up. And the cool part is that here's one of the things where Scrum has actively given us space to go and deal with this. And so I think this becomes something for retrospective, but I want to say there's two ways to handle it. One is to just have a discussion about how we're going to interact. Use this event that you just came to as I want to try it out. Hey, I heard this thing, and I think a few of these things that we do might be useful to us. Let's try this out. And so I want to ask these questions. I do that all the time. I'll go to a class, I'll learn something, I'll come back and be like, hey, let's try this and let's see how this works, and then see if there's a bite there.
All right. Next question says, do you display the sprint goal as a tool for the dev team to help discussion during the daily Scrum?
I do, yes. Or better yet, I should say, I give them that as a suggestion, and then they figure out how they're going to put their stuff together. If it was a new team, I would probably make the suggestion about here's what might help. But if it's a team that's been doing their thing for a while, the point of the daily Scrum is to make a plan for the next 24 hours on how they can best achieve the sprint goal. If the sprint goal is not being considered for that for that activity, then we miss the point of the daily Scrum. And so now here's another one where if you've been doing this for a while, because when we first started talking about this was back in March, and now we've been doing this for a while, so you might already have your norms, and it might be really weird to bring in this thing. It might even feel invasive. So use this event as a way to bring up the subject again, like, hey, they were talking about doing this crazy thing, like putting the sprint goal up in present so that we can make a good decision, like, and see how that works. Because don't forget, that's what the purpose is.
All right. Someone asked, what was the metric tool that you used to display, that you displayed in your slide for the sprint review?
It is one of my favorite tools. It is called Excel. So whenever I use all these other ones, whenever I use those other big company tools, they do a lot of cool stuff and they don't do what I want them to do. But Excel does exactly what I tell it to. And I like things that are pretty. I spend a lot of my, even though I do a lot of coaching, I try to spend more of my time with my UX team, because I start to understand a lot about what I do is about their thing. It's about customer experience. And so I've also learned to make things look better too, because if you enjoy using your tools, you'll more likely use your tools. And so I'm going to go back there for the people who are, bam. So that is just simply Excel. I have stacked a few charts on each other and made things pretty. And then I have, I think on the next tab, I have the information that feeds these data points. On this particular one, I have leading value indicators, things that we can actually make changes to, and then the lagging ones, the things that we can't, when they're changed, we'll just find out what they are. But I can't do things about this besides do these things now, hoping it'll impact those later. There's two types of leading value indicators, and that's one of them. The other one is just things that happen that inform us about what might happen later. Maybe we can't affect them, but they just are indicators for what might happen later. And so, yeah, I have that in Excel. This was built by Don McGreal, actually, the guy who is doing the product owner talk. And it comes from something else that I think we should know about as Scrum Masters, evidence-based management. Just the ability to not focus on the data that's that we I think we normally do, which is velocity. How many things did we build? That stuff doesn't matter. It's not going to keep the company going. But the things that actually matter are, what are the outcomes of our work? So it's not just about activity. It's about the outcomes and direct evidence of performance and stuff like that. So you'll see it here. Evidence-based management is the beautiful tool that this is based on. Oh, and there's a book that we use in our organization often called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Check out YouTube. There's an easy, there's like a, I don't know, 7-minute video or something like that, 4DX, 4 Disciplines of Execution. So those two things smashed together plus Excel equals that.
I actually had a question. You mentioned books at the very beginning. What are your 3 favorite people books?
Ooh, favorite people books? Let's see, Lynchpin, Seth Godin. It's my one that, like, it's my one that lets me think about, okay, so who do I want to be? So that's a really, really important people one to me. That's weird. I haven't been asked this question, so I'm having to think about that. This is going to be strange, but it falls into this. The other one is Strengths Finder. So that's one, even though it's very data driven, but it lets me appreciate people in a different way. Then the final one would be emotional intelligence 2.0, I guess. Those are my, man, it's weird because favorite might be like, did I enjoy reading them? Like, no. I didn't, because it felt like a bunch of data points, but what I got out of them was like super and tremendous. I want to add one more, and it's I started with a book called The 5 Love Languages, and I think the workplace version of that is called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, and those things help me so much. Dude, there's so many. Crucial conversations, the empowerment dynamic, like these are the things that help me out. The cool part is they're a part of our leadership program too. Some of them I got from there, some of them I did not, but those are the things that I think guide me on a daily basis. I know you asked for just those few, but I gotta.
No worries. That is about it. We are out of questions and about out of time.
Out of time too. Nice. This came out perfectly on time. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with me. I appreciate it. Hopefully I'll get to see you in real life or in the community or online at some further future time. Thank you.